Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So, whether you're stuck in self doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So, grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small, it's time to embrace your value. So, welcome back to the podcast. We are just so grateful that you guys join us every week and dive into these topics with us. And so today we want to talk about, we're getting really close to the holidays, right? And we want to talk about nervous system regulation. And this might not be something that you're even aware of or really know what it is. I know I didn't until I really got into coaching and kind of started learning some of this. It wasn't something that I understood. So we are going to let our expert talk mostly about it. I might have a few little insights in there. But Kristen, tell us your thoughts on nervous system and nervous system regulation.
Yeah, nervous system regulation is very important for everyone to learn different techniques for so that they can be able to regulate that for themselves because that's our fight or flight response, Jen. So what happens is we feel a threat, some kind of threat. It can be a real threat. It can be an imagined threat. Those imagined threats are like our thoughts or negative core beliefs. um a real threat is like maybe you're about to get in a car wreck, like a bear's coming at you. That's my famous line. Every client would be like, yeah, I've heard the bear one. So like the real threat is like a bear coming at you, which we don't have in this day and age very typically, right? So most of our threats that our brain receives is an imagined threat. So what happens is, and this is just a little biology, because sometimes people feel like, oh, I should be able to just know this, or I should just be able to do it, or and I really like to give people the why. So the why is when we feel a threat, real or imagined, then our amygdala, which is our fight or flight response in our brain, it's that what we call lizard brain, and that goes online. And when that goes online, your frontal lobe, which has all of your executive functioning, all of your thinking skills, practical executive thinking skills, goes offline. So the next thing is that your nervous system fires up. So if you think about your nervous system, all the nerves in your body, right? From your spine all the way out to your all of your nerves. So we get this rush of a inflamed nervous system. And if that's not regulated, then we get into a lot of anxiety, or we'll have physical manifestations. Maybe we'll start having stomach problems, or we'll have tense muscles. A lot of people have it in like their neck, their shoulders. Um, so those will be some of the results of the nervous system being dysregulated and why it gets dysregulated, because we're in that threat mode.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all such really good. I mean, it's so good. Um, so what, and you kind of touched on it, but can you go a little deeper on how how nervous system regulation what role it plays in our healing, like from our trauma. How does
Yeah.
that affect people? Like, how do they use it?
Yes, what a great question. I love it. So trauma, right, is an old threat. So when we talk about trauma, we that's really something that has happened in the past that we continue to relive or rethink about, or it affects your daily function, or every once in a while it'll pop up. We get this dysregulated feeling. So that's what trauma, like PTSD, right? Post traumatic stress disorder. The post is it happened in the past, right? So when we have that PTSD, one of the responses is this nervous system dysregulation. When you sit in that nervous system dysregulation for a long period of time, for some people it's days, for some people it's months, for some people it's years and decades. And so their body creates this constant need to try and relax. And then when you can't, you get more dysregulated. So it's that inflammation that causes the physical pain, which is directly connected to our mental and emotional pain. So there's been a lot of studies, right? If you have emotional pain, a lot of people will have physical pain. If you have physical pain, a lot of people will have emotional pain. So it's really not an either or, it just tends to be a both and. So when we're talking about that, when we're talking about these threats that happen to our mind, it starts creating a lot of anxiety. And when people experience anxiety, it can start piling on itself over and over. And so what happens is that we never really have the opportunity to come down from that if we don't learn these regulation skills.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really great explanation of that. I love that. And so that kind of leads me into my next question. Since we do a podcast on worthiness and how, how we perceive our own worthiness, what's the connection between nervous system regulation and feeling worthy or confident?
Well, I would say there's actually kind of a lot. But to make it simple, I would say if you feel like you're anxious all the time, a lot of people will start feeling like they're not good enough or like they can't do things. We'll just talk about like social anxiety, for example. Um, you have this social anxiety because every time you go out in public, or with a larger group of people, there is some sort of imagined threat that you feel is going to happen to you. And so that starts eroding your self-worth because you can't leave the house. You can't go have fun with your friends. You say no all the time. And then sometimes people are like, we're not going to ask you anymore because you never say yes. So then it just gets into this rhythm or pattern where you stop leaving your house, and then it piles on itself. And now sometimes we can get into a depression because we're isolating. So it's all very connected, and why it's so important to understand these parts of our nervous system and how it works all together, and that it's not a pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just go out in the world and get it done kind of thing. There's a real physical response to all of these threats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, that brings in the topic of boundaries. If you're feeling this way and you're not practicing healthy boundaries, that's one small thing you can start doing so that you do have some nervous system regulation and some worth around it. Because otherwise, um, it all bleeds into that worthiness with the boundaries and just protecting your energy. That's a big thing that I talk about this time of year, is really protecting your energy and making sure you're safe during the holidays. And that kind of all goes right in with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. My thought process is boundaries tends to fix a lot of nervous system dysregulation because and what a great example, the holidays that are coming up, right? And we're a lot of us going to go spend time with our families. And maybe our families are our threat because we have wounds from childhood that we haven't fixed or haven't dealt with or haven't processed. And so we get very anxious thinking about, the dynamic that's going to happen in our family when we're spending a lot of time with each other. And I'm not just trying to blame families. I mean, it's all kinds of things, but this is the holidays and that tends to be the deal, right? So, yes, boundaries are really important in this situation in that let's just take the family example. Let's say you're going home for Thanksgiving and you've got old childhood unresolved childhood wounds and the dynamic that happens in your family has not stopped and so this is the threat, right? Is that this perceived dynamic is going to continue. So a good boundary would be maybe instead of staying with your parents, you stay in a hotel, or maybe you limit how long you're with them. Or if you're really bold and really confident, you verbalize a boundary. When somebody gets into that old dynamic, you say, I'm not going to let you talk to me like that. If this continues, I'm going to have to go. And those things take a lot of strength and a lot of confidence to execute without creating problems within the family dynamic and sort of contributing in your own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell clients when it comes to those bold boundaries, I always tell them if the situation happened and you didn't like the way it played out, this is a great time to pull out your journaling practice and decide what you wanted it to look like and then practice it. And practice it in front of the mirror. Say it until you can say it without um the edge in your voice, the feeling like you're going to cry or scream or whatever it is that you do when you get that way, and just really knowing that you can say it when the time happens again, because you know it's going to happen again. If it happens over and over, if it's something that happens every year at the holidays, it's going to happen again. And being prepared, and I can tell you from my own experience, I actually had to do this in a job that I was in, and having that preparation really changed everything for me. I mean, I would come home and spend 20, 30 minutes at a time practicing it in front of the mirror and just pretending I was talking to that person and just really saying it and knowing that what I was doing was right for me and for the business that I was protecting. And so, yeah, absolutely. It definitely takes some practice but it's a great way to step into some confidence and some worthiness for sure.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And what that actually does is that leads us into one of the ways that you can regulate your nervous system, right? So if we practice and we feel comfortable with what we're going to say or what we're going to do, then our nervous system tends to be more regulated because we don't have that threat anymore. You've worked it out through talking to yourself in the mirror and practicing and practicing. And so you're ready, right? So I think of all of these nervous system regulation tools that I really want to get into. I I think of them as the practice for the game, right? If you think about sports like a sports analogy, it's the practice for the game and the game is the threat, right? So it's going home, it's going to work or having to deal with certain people at work or that social event that you have to attend for whatever reason. Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's a work event. And so um this is how we start working on regulating our nervous system in advance. What a great example of like preparing yourself in advance for what the perceived threat is going to be.
Yeah. And honestly, it's worked wonders for me. So I highly recommend it. So are you ready? Because that was actually my next question was what are some tools, some specific techniques, tools, ways, modalities, breath work, that people can use to regulate their nervous system?
Yeah, and this is something that I teach all my clients. So I would say that the biggest one, the easiest one to do anywhere, anytime is some breath work. And there's a million different kinds. My favorite that I know for me and my clients that works 99% of the time is called polyvagal breathing. So what that means is it's that vagus nerve gets to relax because of how you're actually doing your breathing. So there's other things called box breathing or belly breathing or deep breathing, and I mean there's hundreds. I couldn't even name them all. And I know a lot of people who really focus on breath work, and I would love to have them on the show sometime so they could give us maybe another angle for this. So my version that I teach is what I call 3-3-6. So it's in for 3 through your nose, hold for 3, and out for 6 like you're blowing bubbles. So I'll give you an example. So it's in through your nose, hold for 3, and then out for 6 like this. And it's just repeat, repeat, repeat. It's 12 seconds. You do it 10 times, that's 2 minutes, right? And by then, you've calmed down. So I would say that's the number one easiest way, whether you're driving or in a meeting or having to walk around somewhere, you're going to have to breathe anyway. So let's do it in a way that's calming to our nervous system.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great breath. I love that. So when we're so busy and we have all this stuff going on, how do we know that we're really in dysregulation or and how do we take the time to get it back in regulation? Like what are some signs and symptoms and easy like we've been talking kind of some easy techniques like that breath work would be a great way. But how do we know like what triggers us?
Yeah, so great two-part question. So the first part is how do we know when we're dysregulated, right? And the easy answer is when our body goes into fight or flight, we feel a threat, as I was describing earlier. There are certain physical symptoms that are recognizable. So I mentioned a couple, which is that sort of that rush of adrenaline when you first feel the threat, right? So the threat is when we talk about fight or flight, and there's more, there's fight, flight, fawn, freeze, right? We've been adding, but the basics are fight or flight, and the others are just sort of subcategories within these two. So when you have that rush of adrenaline, that's your body getting ready to fight, right? So if we go back to the bear, it's your body is getting ready to fight that bear or run away from the bear. So that's what fight or flight really, really looks like in a very practical sense. So that rush of adrenaline, that's our body getting ready to fight or flight. Other symptoms include muscle tension, right? Because we're getting ready. I mean, if you start thinking about it, these are all ways that anybody would get ready to run or to fight. So muscle tension, sometimes you get racing thoughts because you have to start putting a plan together about how you're going to deal with this bear, right? And you're looking for all the different ways you can escape or all the, like, there's a stick over there. I can use this to hit the bear. Our vision will narrow so that we can stay very focused on what it is that we're going to be dealing with. a lot of stomach issues. So if you look at people with ulcers, it's stress related almost every single time, right? That's because when there's a threat, our stomach stops digesting. It takes all of those resources and puts it into the muscles, into the brain to get ready to prepare for that fight or flight. Sweaty palms, need to urinate, right? That's one of them. If you watch movies, you'll see a lot of times where they'll have somebody like they'll release their bladder when they're in a fearful situation. That's one of those symptoms that happens when we're in fight or flight. So those are some of the most common ones that people will experience. Rapid heartbeat, things like that. Okay, so that's how we know when we're in fight or flight. So then the next question is, what do we do about those? Right. So that's how we know the difference between fight or flight and like just a busyness, right? So a busyness is sort of you're rushing around, maybe you're thinking about a lot of things, but you don't have those physical symptoms. How do we deal with them? Right. So we've got the breathing. Another one that's great is exercise. And it doesn't have to be an hour or 30 minutes. It's even a 10 to 15-minute walk will help release that nervous energy, that anxious energy that happens. So again, your body wants to run or fight. It's ready to go. And if we just sit at our desk and feel uncomfortable about whatever's going on, we're not releasing that energy, right? And so we have to get up, we have to walk. This is why people pace sometimes, right? This is their natural reaction is to just pace and get rid of that energy. Some people will rock, right? Like they'll be moving their bodies completely unconsciously. They don't even know what's happening, shifting from foot to foot. These are all little nervous habits that people have. So breathing, a short walk or some other kind of exercise, even drop down and do some push-ups or sit-ups, we can all use a little bit of that. And also, so some of the things that you may need an item for, these are grounding exercises. So a hot drink, a cold drink kind of brings us back to present. An ice cube in the hand is one that residential treatment centers will use. Is it like a cold, very cold washcloth or like a cold pack in the hand ice cube because so what we want to do is we want to feel something. That's what grounding really is, right? We're bringing ourselves back to present, back to earth. Instead of our energy flying around, it's being grounded. Or something warm in our hands, right? Or even like think about petting your cat or petting your dog and how relaxing that is and how calming that is. We have to be present. We have to feel the cat. We have to feel the dog. Being very intentional about Jen, your cat's behind you. That's
She's been pawing
like
at me for a while, and I was like, well, that's
perfect
ironic.
timing. Popped your head up right at the exact time.
She wants me to be present with her.
Yes, she does. So those are just some of the really practical ways that you can kind of bring yourself back down to present and get out of that fight or flight space.
That was perfect. I love that. Yes. And I think that for our listeners, that's really good advice for them to take with them and use it. So I have just a couple more questions on this. And I think this is probably something I know when I first got started. Whoa, the cat's really going to be in the middle of this podcast now. I think when I first got started with all of this, I didn't know if I believed that nervous system regulation techniques would create long-term change. I always thought it was more of like a continuous process. I maybe have changed my mind on that a little, but I would love to hear your thoughts and like if you've had clients that have continually used something and how it has made that long-term change for them.
Yes, so I would say both are really true. right? I think that with practice, these things can create lasting change. So it is a process and a lasting change effect. So the process is the practice, right? So yes, it'll help you in the moment. The breathing will help you in the moment. Also, the more you regulate your nervous system, the the easier it is to continue to regulate it. And if you don't go into threat mode, right, we're still talking about imagined threats. So if you can learn to keep your nervous system regulated when an imagined threat comes at you, whether it's your thought or a location that maybe you're at that reminded you of something, if you can learn to regulate yourself and do it pretty automatically, then now we've created lasting change. Now we've created a situation where we can tolerate going out in the world, where we can tolerate going home to our families, that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna say both, Jen. Like I think it's a process, and then the more you do the process, the more the lasting change works.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I love that. That's perfect. So, if someone is new to the concept of nervous system regulation, where do you recommend they start?
Yeah, starting with the breathing. Like I that's the number one thing that I teach all of my clients to do if they need to regulate their nervous system, if they need to come down from anxiety, is start with the breath. So again, it's that 3-3-6. Now, when I mentioned what are the physical symptoms that happen right before we start feeling anxious, it's that muscle tension, it's that sweaty palms, it's that stomach starts to get a little, queasy or tight. That's your time to then start the process with the breathing, with the walking. So I tell everybody, don't wait. Don't be like, oh, this will pass. It'll be okay. It's fine. I can sweat this one out, right? I can white knuckle it. No, just start the breathing right then. Again, 12 seconds for each cycle. 10 of those, 2 minutes. If you can't take 2 minutes to calm yourself before, as you're starting to feel these things, then you're going to continue to create a situation where you can't do the lasting change. I mean, I know I'm asking people to do hard things sometimes when they go from 0 to 100, or maybe they just live at 50. You live at 50 and 50 to 100 feels, even more. But with practice, everybody that practices that makes this part of their daily life. So again, practicing when you don't need it, right? Maybe you're just sitting in your chair and you're like, I feel good, but I'm still going to do my breathing real quick because I have to be ready for whatever comes at me. And so again, it's that practice for the big game. The big game is whatever the threat is. So practicing, I 5 times a day would be great. 3 times a day but some people need 10, some people need 20. It's again, it's where you live. Do you live at 0? Do you live at 20? Do you live at 50? It depends on how much trauma you've had, how much you've processed it, what you've done in the past. And so I just meet everybody where they're at, Jen, and just try to help them live a better quality of life in between times that we do our processing work.
I love that. And meeting people where we are is absolutely what we both are all about. I love that. I do have one other suggestion going along with, especially with the breathing and regulating your nervous system and the practicing side of it. Because this was something I learned when I got certified as a health and a life coach. And that is to do this breath work before you eat a meal, because it does regulate your nervous system. I mean, anytime you do it, it's going to regulate your nervous system, whether it needs it or not. And so making that a practice before you eat actually really helps your digestion system. I can't speak, but it's going to help digestion. And that's going to help you around what you're eating and just make you feel better all the way around. So if you need a place to start practicing, like something to kind of remind you and trigger you or give you a cue that, oh, I'm going to practice my breathing, doing it right before you eat's a really great way to start that.
I love that. I actually haven't ever heard that. So thanks for sharing that. I'm gonna use it. But
Absolutely.
it makes perfect sense when you think about what I was talking about earlier, where it shuts down your digestive system. So if you're if you're living at a 25 or a 50 anxiety and you go to eat and we're already in that place and we already have inflammation running through our body, then yeah, we might eat fast and our body might not be able to digest in the way that we want it to. And so, yeah, it creates that. And now that you said that, I've got another one, which is when we start thinking we are hungry in between meals, that doesn't include some kind of snack that you would ordinarily have in your diet, your dietary system, then that's a good time to breathe. Because if we feel like we're in a threat mode, a lot of us, me included, will use food as comfort.
Yeah.
So for me, when I feel stressed, the first thing I want is chocolate, right? So there's a biological reason why chocolate is helpful for stressful situations. Um, and right, it's not the best solution. So what I'm going to do is add on to your wonderful information, which is if you struggle with emotional eating, that's probably a really good place to add in the breath as well, so that we're not snacking when we're not supposed to be snacking.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love it. This was really good, really great. Thank you for all of that wisdom that you shared with us and just being willing to come in and chat with us about that. I think this is going to be beneficial for anyone listening to this. I mean, any time of the year, of course, but especially right now around the holidays. And, if you need to listen to this a couple times, or if you have a friend or maybe even a family member that you're like, hey, they could really benefit from this, feel free to share this with them. They deserve to have the same balance in life that you're getting with this information. So please feel free to share it. Don't forget to subscribe and like us so that we get a little more. The more you guys subscribe, the more YouTube will share this out for us. So then we can reach more listeners and do more work with this.
Yeah, and don't forget to leave comments,
Yes.
ask questions, right? All our information is included in our YouTube. So again, we'd love to hear what other things you want information about. We have our own list and we're happy to continue down our list, but I would really, really love for some listeners and some watchers to put out an idea for either one of us or both of us to speak on. I'm really excited for that to start happening.
Yes, absolutely. I am as well. All right. We'll have another fantastic week and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.